counties must remove MCAs from implementing development projects and eliminate unconstitutional funds like ward development funds and concentrate on their constitutional mandate of oversight, legislation, and representation.
Immediate publication of National Debt Register for public scrutiny. The national debt must be audited, and those found responsible for mismanagement must be faced prosecuted without exception.
Money laundering and terrorism financing highlights the seriousness of corruption crisis and its impact in the country's economic and social development. So, the Kenya Devolution CSO Working Group calls for end to budgeted corruption while advocating for immediate transfer of all devolved functions. Kenya's recent grey listing by the Financial Action Task Force due to deficiencies in combating money laundering and terrorism financing highlights the seriousness of corruption crisis and its impact in the country's economic and social development. This grey listing has significant implications for international trade, investment, and economic growth. This has further been compounded by challenges. This has further compounded the challenges facing implementation of devolution in Kenya. We have witnessed cases of increased budgeted corruption within both levels of government. This insidious practice, where funds for public services are siphoned off through inflated contracts, ghost workers, and outright theft, is crippling service delivery and undermining the very essence of devolution. The devastating consequences of rampant corruption are all too clear. Roads remain impassable, healthcare facilities lack essential medicine and equipment, and schools operate without adequate resources. These failures are not merely a logistical oversight, but they result from misappropriation of public funds intended to improve our communities' social and economic welfare. On transfer of devolved functions, budgeted corruption is not the only challenge curtailing the advancement of socio-economic rights. The failure of the national government to transfer functions to county governments and the unwillingness of National Treasury to fund them are killing the essence of devolution. We are concerned that His Excellency President William Ruto's past commitments during his swearing in September 2022 and during the devolution conference in August 2023 are yet to be fulfilled to date. We look forward to completing the process of transfer of all functions within 30 days and the attendant resources to enable the devolved units to function optimally in delivering services to citizenry. On the other hand, county governments must also focus on their constitutional functions and immediately stop spending on national government mandates while compromising the quality of devolved services. Furthermore, counties must remove MCAs from implementing development projects and eliminate unconstitutional funds like ward development funds and concentrate on their constitutional mandate of oversight, legislation, and representation. Likewise, the national government must respect the principle of devolution and cease engaging in functions that have already been devolved. Currently, we observe that national governments continue to invest in rural roads, primary healthcare facilities, both of which are under the jurisdiction of county governments. This duplication results in inefficient resource allocation and hampers service delivery at the county level. We call for clear delineation of functions to prevent redundancy and ensure effective governance. The National Treasury must ensure timely disbursement of the equitable share of nationally raised revenue to county governments as stipulated in the Public Finance Management Act without failing to avoid the disruption of service delivery. Just like it is provided for in the Public Finance Management Act, counties ought to receive their share of equitable monies by 15th of every month. National Treasury should comply. Consequently, the National Assembly must expedite the process of approval of the audited accounts to form basis for revenue sharing. These reports must be approved and must not be less than 2 years after the approval. For all this to work, we call for cooperation, coordination, and consultation between the national government and county government and all the other independent institutions involved. This can be achieved through operationalization, strengthening, and adequate financing of intergovernmental structures and forums. Thank you.
Misuse of public resources. Fighting budgeted corruption and transferring devolved function is not an end itself. The national and county government must take decisive action to curb the misuse of public resources by ensuring the timely publication of budget implementation report as stipulated in the Constitution Kenya 2010, the Public Finance Management Act 2012, and the Access to Information Act 2016. Strict penalties must be enforced for non-compliance with these standards. Still, to combat corruption effectively, we demand the expeditious prosecution of all corruption-related cases by Ethics and Corruption Commission and Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. These agencies must act impartially and expeditiously to expedite cases against all individuals implicated in corruption, irrespective of their political affiliation. Additionally, the full implementation of recommendation from the General Report for county government and national government ministries, department, and agencies is crucial to restoring accountability in public service. We express deep concern over perceived selective nature of investigation and prosecution by Ethics and Corruption and Kenya National Audit Office. This has been reported in some cases where, like CIA, where the chair of the Ethics and Corruption come from, we have realized that he doesn't want to prosecute people who have been stealing public resources. And it has also been reported that Kenao at times does bias audit depending on who the county head is. And we are also saying any individual serving in the public office who does not meet ethical standards outlined in the Chapter 6 of the Constitution of Kenya should be immediately relieved of their duties and subjected to investigation. Furthermore, all public institutions responsible for enforcing accountability and justice, including ethics and corruption, the judiciary, the Auditor's General Office, the Office of the Budget Controller, and the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights, the Commission on Administrative Justice, the National Gender and Equality Commission, must be adequately funded and strengthened to ensure optimal performance, because we have realized their state is weakening them by underfunding them so that they don't perform their function as they are. Governors and Speaker of County Assembly must be held accountable for poor governance, including financial mismanagement, delays in settling pending bills that negatively impact citizen livelihood, and failure to adhere to constitutional provision on public service recruitment. Additionally, we demand the immediate publication of National Debt Register for public scrutiny. The national debt must be audited, and those found responsible for mismanagement must be faced prosecuted without exception.
Thank you. So public participation. Public participation remains a cornerstone of democracy, and we demand the passage of national policy and laws in public participation and civic education as a priority. Adequate resources must be allocated and ring-fenced for this activity at national and county levels to ensure meaningful and uniform engagement across the counties. Both levels of government must rationalize recurrent and develop expenditure to enhance civil development. The national wage bill must be maintained below 35% of annual revenue, as stipulated in the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and related regulations. We strongly oppose county officials continual waste of public fund on unnecessary foreign trips, which place undue burden on the taxpayers and divide resources for essential services. The second one is abolish of, that is the National Government Affirmation Action Fund and the National Government Constituency Development Fund. We urge the MPs and the MCAs to strictly adhere their constitutional roles and legislative oversights and representations. Additionally, unconstitutional funds such as the National Government Affirmation Action Fund and the National Government Constitution Development Fund must be abolished immediately. These resources should be redirected to the county governments and improve service delivery straight to devolution. And the last one, protect civic spaces in the light of dissent. We are deeply concerned about the shrinking civic spaces in Kenya at the national and the county levels. Report of the intimidation and harassment targeting citizen and civil society organizations that speak out against corruption are alarming. The alleged involvement of gang-linked and the county officials and national government representatives in silencing dissent is a grave violation of democratic principles. So such action create a climate of fear and accountability and demands the role of the law. We demand immediate action to protect civic freedom and hold those responsible for intimidation accountable. Last, we urge the Kenyan government to take immediate and decisive steps to address these critical issues: accountability, transparency, and enhance the role of the non-negotiable principle in enhancing a just and equitable society. We must achieve responsible government and will continue to advocate for policy that safeguard the interests of all Kenyans. Signed by the Kenya Devolution of Civil Society Organization Working Group, KDCWG. Thank you.
Thank you. We now invite questions, if any, on the statement, the issues you've raised around transport functions, misuse of public resources, public participation, and abolition of the CDF and protection of civic space.
There's no question.
No questions? Can we go?
Yes.
My name is Omala from West TV. On the issue of abolition of CDF and DCDF, maybe if you can elaborate as to why you think it should be abolished. If there is any misappropriation of the fund, if you can quantify the money that has been misappropriated through the fund.
Yes.
My name is Vincent Apande for Radio Citizen. I just want to get clarification. You did mention that there's some kind of biasness when it comes to investigating the corruption cases. Could you expound on what you think here?
Thank you. There's a hand somewhere.
Yes, there was a directive by Deputy President Koliki that the national government was supposed to carry out the transfer of the functions by December 13th. Have you followed up on the matter?
Okay. So those three, I think, Evans, you can pick the issue of the transfer of functions. You'd speak to the CIA, the biasness, and the one on CDF. So the one who is closer to the mic can proceed.
Sorry. Yeah, it is indeed true that national government, and as I mentioned, starting with the top office in the country, the top leadership in the country of the office of the president, have committed to transfer of all county functions and the attendant resources. Lest we not forget that during the devolution conference in August 2023, the president directed that all functions and the attendant resources be transferred to county governments within 60 days. So even the deputy president adding voice to that process is coming too late in the day. But it's a good commitment, and we are aware that Intergovernmental Relations Technical Committee, IGRTC, has done the technical part of unbundling, costing, and even given advisories on how this process should go, a roadmap for transfer of this function. Already, a Gazette notice was issued, I think, on 16th December last year. And what is being awaited is a detailed analysis of these services, so that we are very clear on how much counties need, additional resources counties need to get to be able to deliver these functions. But we also appreciate that this has to have a legal framework. And the Office of the Attorney General is required to table an omnibus bill that allows all these functions to be transferred. So what we would urge is that we urge the Office of the AG to do his part, but when these bills get to Parliament, both National Assembly and Senate, we urge the MPs to move with speed, just like we have seen how they have cooperated previously in terms of impeachment, in terms of appointments, political appointments. We want them to move with the highest speed possible to ensure that that law is passed, and such that in the next financial year, 2025-26, counties get at least 272 billion more, as per the costing of the IGRTC, over and above what they're already getting to deliver these functions.
Can I proceed then? On the skewed investigation and prosecution, I think we are not visitors in this country. You realize that cases that were started when some people were not in government, they were dropped. Others were started afresh because they opposed the government of the day. And I can demonstrate this also in some cases. I remember in the July 15th, I wrote to ODP and Ethics and Corruption. I was asking them that they are biased in prosecuting some cases that were clear in Siaya. And on 2nd of August, the ODP wrote back, and they wrote back through Mercy Gateru, Senior Prosecution Director, and they instructed Ethics and Corruption to move in and investigate those cases. To date, they have never responded, and tells you that because their political alignment, their political correctness, there is no likelihood that those cases will happen. And you could see areas that people are perceived not to be in the government. They are being haunted and being prosecuted and taken to court. And some of those cases are trump-up charges, while the real issues that are supposed to be taken to court are deflated because of political reason, or some people are buying themselves out of freedom so that they can be free through using public money. Yes, yes.
On the question of abolition of the national government, CDF, the High Court and ultimately the Supreme Court did pronounce itself very clearly on this matter, that CDF and those other funds that are operating under the ambits of MPs or members of parliament are unconstitutional. One of the reasons why these pronouncements was made was on the question of the principle of separation of powers. We cannot have members of parliament overseeing the management or running of CDF and at the same time wanting to provide effective oversight. The issue of CDF is one that has really affected the ability of members of parliament to objectively oversee legislation in this country. Because when we are discussing the division of revenue between the national and county governments, members of parliament tend to lean towards the national government because they know any reduction in the allocation to the national government will have a bearing on the allocation to CDF. So it makes them not to be objective when we are passing legislation of financial matter, because they have already a vested interest in more money remaining at the national level. CDF and these other funds are undermining devolution. The constitution is very clear. We only have two levels of government, the county and the national. Constituency is a unit of representation. So we cannot have resources going to the constituency purporting to address functions like bursaries and offering services around sports, environment. The constitution only recognizes two levels of government. So public resources must only be applied at two levels, national government and county government. And therefore, CDF, and by extension, there is no role for members of parliament in discharging or managing public resources. It's causing duplication, it's interfering with the doctrine of separation of powers, and it's creating unnecessary pressure on the national government. Because I think MP's office have no administrative structure that is good enough to manage public resources. So we are saying, let members of parliament remain with the sole responsibility of oversight, representation, and legislation.
On the same, I'm just wondering if the court ruling alone is enough to abolish CDF, because they have the CDF Act, and the same MPs are the ones who will remove the act or enforce it.
The CDF Act was found to be unconstitutional. This country is governed by rule of law. And the courts have interpreted the Constitution and found CDF as unconstitutional.
So what is the next course of action if it's now operating unconstitutional?
I think if you read the ruling, they have been given up to July this year. There was a small window for them to either rework the CDF Act or it stands abolished.